Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Michelle Medina Acevedo's thesis defense. Welcome to all of our viewers on YouTube. Welcome to our readers, and we are very thankful for your help in this accomplishment. Thank you, Luis Garcia. Thank you, David Auerbach. Very excited to be here today. And now we're going to move forward with the presentation. Michelle is going to present her work, and then there will be a conversation with the readers. After the conversation is done, then we're going to pause the stream for a few minutes so that the committee can deliberate about the honor bestowed upon Michelle, and then we will continue with the presentation. So take it away, Michelle.
Thank you. I am going to present now. Let me know if you can see.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to Luis and David for being part of my committee. Today, I will be presenting my thesis titled Transmedia Reading, Reading, Writing, Chatting in the Environment of Screens, Chapter 6, 7, and 8 specifically. So, I will start giving a brief description of the author. David Auerbach. He is an Argentine scholar specialized in communications and distance learning. He is currently a professor and researcher at Austral University in Buenos Aires. And in 2009, he titled Leer, navegar en Internet, un estudio comparativo entre jóvenes y adultos porteños sobre las formas de lectura en la computadora. And in this dissertation, he studied how reading practices were different from adults to younger generations. And based on the findings of his research, he then developed or identified a concept that he called transmedia reading. And based on those things, he published a book titled Lectura Transmedia, Leer, escribir, conversar en el ecosistema de pantallas. This book was published in 2019, and the purpose of this book is to develop this idea of, or this concept of lectura transmedia, which is compared to traditional reading. And the aim of this book is to develop this concept of transmedia reading in order to describe its characteristics, reading strategies, everything that goes into transmedia reading, and sort of deconstruct this myth that we are now superficial readers, that we don't know how to read. Now, why I translated this book? Well, this book sort of gives a counter argument to the idea or the thought that even I have had of that new generations or younger generations don't know how to read. Now, I thought that this was a valid argument until I read this book. And this book gives a really enlightening perspective of how it's not that newer generations don't know how to read, but that they're doing a different kind of reading. And that this new kind of reading has its own reading characteristics, reading strategies, purposes. It's completely different from traditional reading, and so it shouldn't be judged or criticized based on what we have the idea of reading in imprint text. So this description or this comparison between traditional reading and transmedia reading, I think would be incredibly helpful, especially in the field of education, so that we have a better perspective of how we interact with these texts and how they're not necessarily downplaying the descriptions or the characteristics of traditional reading, but it's a new kind of reading. And now, I also thought that this book was incredibly relevant. I started translating this book in the beginnings of the pandemic, where we didn't know if it was going to last long, or we thought that it was only going to last a couple of weeks. Fast forward a year now, we are all immersed in the media. We have all, whether we wanted to or not, been in constant contact with digital text. And so being aware of the characteristics, everything that goes behind the scenes, you could say, of transmedia reading, we are able to be more efficient in the way that we interact and engage with these texts. Now, Lectura Transmedia is a very large book. It has a total of 184 pages on Kindle, which far exceeded the amount of words that I could translate for this thesis. And so I selected 3 chapters to translate. Instead of choosing the first 3 chapters or the last 3 chapters, I selected chapters 6, 7, and 8, because these 3 chapters give a really good overview of the entire topic, the theme of the book, even though they do have references to previous chapters of the book. Someone who might not have access to these other chapters could still have a good glimpse or idea of what goes into this book, of the concept of transmedia reading, just by reading these 3 chapters. So chapter 6 in my translation is titled Reading and Neuroscience, Words Restructure Consciousness. And this chapter focuses on deconstructing the idea that we have become superficial readers. And so he explains how transmedia readers have restructured their brain in the same way that readers restructured their brains when they started reading hundreds of years ago. And so he explains how we weren't born reading. So in the same way that we have to internalize and interiorize the way we read in print texts hundreds of years ago, the same way we have interiorized the way that we read digital texts. And so based on this comparison of superficial reading, or this idea that he's how we are not superficial, we are multilinear thinkers or multilinear readers, and how we have become interactive readers, that we have to do sort of like a multitasking kind of reading that is maybe superficial, but it's because of the purpose of this type of reading, that we have to be able to get glimpses from different media at the same time. Then chapter 7 is titled Hybridization Between Reading and Writing. And in this chapter, he describes what he calls the hybrid genre. And he uses the example of a chat. And this chapter focuses on deconstructing the idea that we have also forgotten how to write. And he uses the example of chats to explain how the writing that we do in the chat has sort of incorporated orality in a way that traditional writing or formal writing doesn't. And so this type of writing incorporates paralinguistic elements like emojis or emoticons in a way that we have included characteristics that were lost from orality into a type of writing that tries to merge these 2 characteristics. And so he also explains how there are multiple types of hybrid genres. For example, we can have the example of a fan fiction in which a reader can consume, for example, a movie and then produce their own stories. And so the constant interplay of the reader becoming a producer, becoming engaged in the text that he is consuming, goes into what is titled From Digital Reading to Transmedia Reading. And in this chapter, he formally defines and explains what transmedia reading is. And in this chapter, he explains how transmedia reading is he no longer compares it to traditional reading, but to digital reading. And he describes transmedia reading as an evolution of digital reading, because it no longer just requires you to be reading a digital text, but it has 2 distinct characteristics. It has to involve multiple media, and the reader has to be engaged. And so he introduces the term of prosumers, which is the consumer becoming a producer. The reader consumes the text, but then produces its own. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an entire text, for example, an essay, but it could just be, let's say, writing or reading a book and then tweeting out something, or writing a book and maybe writing a post on it. So it's it requires the reader to be engaged and producing some other text. Now, on to the challenges that I encountered while translating. I divided them into 3 major categories. There were other challenges, but these were the 3 major categories. And these are quotes, terms, and style. So because of the nature of this book, it is very much loaded with research. And because of the research, he has to quote many authors. And so there were 3 different types of quotes that I identified. And those were quotes that were originally in English, quotes that were originally in Spanish, and quotes that had been previously translated into English from Spanish or other languages. So for each type of quote, I had to incorporate the translation in a different way. So for the ones that were originally in English, I tried to find and successfully found all of the source text to be able to include the original words of the author. Because this is a very recent book, this was published in 2019, he quotes recent authors. And so I was able to find, thanks to Google Books, which, funny enough, he talks about in the book. He talks about how Google Books has sort of deconstructed the book so that it's no longer a bound text, it's quotes that are floating around on the internet. Well, thanks to that reality, I was able to find all of the quotes that were in the book and include them in my translation. For the ones that were originally in Spanish that had not been translated into English, or that I couldn't find the translation, I translated myself. And for the ones that had been previously translated into English that had been published, I used those translations. There was one specific quote from Plato, which had been translated multiple times. And I used the translation by Benjamin Jowett, which is the only scholar who has translated all of Plato's dialogues. For the ones that were originally in English and the ones that were previously translated into English, I included endnotes with the citation to the original source so that you could find the original text if you wanted to. Now, the second category is terminology, and this was the most challenging part of translating this book. He uses jargon specifically from the field of communication and computers, distance learning, and I had to make sure that I was using the proper terminology. The most challenging word to translate was soporte. Soporte he uses throughout the entire book, and he uses it with different connotations, I later found out. In chapter 6, he uses with the connotation or the definition of that you can find in the Real Academia Española, which is material en cuya superficie se registra inscripción. So it refers to literally the material that is being inscribed. Now, in chapter 7 and 8, and in some senses in chapter 6, he uses it not describing or not referring to the material itself. This sentence is an example of that. It says, esta singularidad del chat es determinada en gran medida por las características del soporte. So here he is referring to the way that we write in a chat. And so it no longer refers to the material. It doesn't refer to what the e-reader or the computer is made out of, but the interface or the format that the information is presented. And so based on this sentence, I realized that soporte could not be translated as material for the entirety of the chapters. And so I did a lot of research trying to find how this word was used in Spanish and in English. And I found that in Spanish, soporte is used to refer to both. But in English, when it's referring to the specific physical material, they use the word material. And when it comes to digital text, they refer to interface or format. Now, he uses interface in other instances. He does use the word interfaz. So I chose format for when he refers to soporte in digital text. Now, the term lectura profunda, which is what he compares transmedia reading to, in terms of traditional imprint text is used throughout the entire book. Now, he compares it to lectura, or he doesn't compare it, he uses both terms, lectura profunda and lectura concentrada. And so I had to find a term that was used in the field and that was also consistent. And so I had 4 options. I had critical reading, focused reading, close reading, and in-depth reading. Now, critical reading I eliminated because critical reading implied critical thinking. And while it could be implied that you think critically while you're reading critically, that's not always the case when he refers to lectura profunda. So I eliminated critical thinking or critical reading, and I had focus, close, and in-depth. Because he also uses lectura concentrada, I used focused reading for lectura concentrada, and then had 2 options for lectura profunda, which is the term that he uses most often. I had close and in-depth reading. So then I went into a lot of research to try to find which one was most common. Close reading is a lot more common than in-depth reading, but I based my decision on an article by a scholar called Nancy Catherine Hales. In 2010, she published an article describing or comparing close reading to hypertext reading, which is the exact idea that Albarello develops in his book. And so based on that very, very similar text, I decided that close reading was going to be the best translation for lectura profunda. And then the last translation challenge I had was style. Albarello's style is characterized by very, very, very long sentences. This sentence is an example of that. This entire sentence on the right is just one sentence. It says, Wolf, por su parte, actualiza los planteos de Sócrates y se plantea si la información sin orientación creará una falsa ilusión de conocimiento y por consiguiente restringirá los procesos de pensamiento más cruciales, lentos y difíciles que conducen al verdadero conocimiento y en sí, a la vez que se pregunta si las nuevas generaciones que pasan tanto tiempo leyendo delante de las pantallas no están sustituyendo las capacidades del cerebro lector. Now, while Spanish is characterized by having really long sentences, I found that he uses it so much throughout the book that it's no longer a characteristic of Spanish, but rather his own style. And so in the beginning, I tried to mimic his style as much as I could, but I realized that sometimes like the pronouns weren't, there was no pronoun antecedent, and so it was not very clear what he was talking about or what he was referring to. And so I decided that I was, instead of trying to mimic his style or trying to replicate his very long sentences, I was trying to be loyal to the meaning of the text. And so I decided to separate most or a lot of the sentences that were really, really long, because in English they just weren't clear. So for this sentence specifically, I translated it as, for her part, Wolf updates Socrates' claims and argues if information without direction could create a false sense of knowledge and therefore restrict the most crucial, slow, and difficult thought processes that lead to real knowledge. Likewise, she questions if the new generations who spend so much time reading in front of a screen are not replacing the capacities of the reading brain. So it's the same exact information, but it's more concise and it's clearer than if I had just one really long sentence. And also, he really loves adverbs, specifically the adverb precisamente. He uses it a lot in his book, and I found that the adverbs were usually in the middle of the sentence, and they interrupted the flow of the sentences when they were translated. And so, even though I did maintain most of his adverbs, sometimes I changed the order so that it would sound more natural in English. And so, translating Lectura Transmedia, I found or realized the importance of research. Most of the time from this translation went into research, And I realized that the research just never ends. For example, I finished translating chapter 6 around October or November of last year. And there was this term of espacialización, which when I encountered the word, I had no idea what it meant. So I looked for the definition, and it turns out that the word is not in the Diccionario de la Real Academia Española. And so I had to go into very extensive research of trying to find what the word means and in what context it's used. And so that led me into entire research of the world of music, which I had no idea of. And I found out that espacialización, it refers to the way the music is placed. So for example, sometimes you can put on a headphone and hear the music go from one ear to the other. That's being made possible by espacialización. And in English, the word is spatialization. So I found that the word was used in that context, and it's very similar. The word is very similar in both Spanish and English. Later on, when I was writing my preface around February, I did even more research to try to triple check all of my decisions. And I found that I found a tweet of somebody had tweeted out to La RAE asking for the definition of espacialización. And they responded and they tweeted out the definition. So I was able to confirm what I had decided on a few months before. So I found that the research for a translation just never ends. And it's just absolutely immense, the amount of research that goes into translating just 3 chapters of a book. I discovered how to understand the author. He has a very particular style, and even though this is not a literary text, his style does shine through. And I had to identify his style so that I was able to understand his really, really long sentences that sometimes were very confusing. And so understanding the author and the way in which he writes, he refers to things that were mentioned a few chapters back without any reference clearly in that sentence, really helped me to be able to then find my own style and incorporate what he was saying, trying to incorporate his own style, but also be loyal to what I was translating. When I first started translating, I was being very literal. I was very scared of moving anything around. But then later on, when I found these very, very extensive sentences that just, to me, didn't make any sense, I had to be more comfortable with moving things around and trying to understand what the author was saying, and in my translation, be able to communicate that message clearly. And so that is it for my translation. Thank you all very much for being here. Thank you to Luis and David for agreeing to be part of my committee, and I look forward to hearing your comments.
You want to go ahead, David? Or you want me to go ahead?
I'll go. That's okay. That's okay. First of all, Michelle, I want to congratulate you. I think that you did a really, really good job. Yeah, I have some general comments that I think can apply across the board. I don't think it's so necessary to separate the preface for me from your translation, except for a few points, but which actually were brought up in your presentation. In any event, so let me get to my list. Okay. For one thing, I have my own pet peeves, as everybody knows. So, and those pet peeves have to do sometimes with formatting and what some of my colleagues used to refer to as mechanical issues. And one thing that is a very, very slight importance, but it still bugs me, is paragraph style. with indenting, and indenting with the very first paragraph, which I think is superfluous and also it bugs me. The Chicago Manual of Style agrees with me. Most style guides do, but they're ambiguous about it. In other words, it depends on whether it's a manuscript or it's, but in any event, I corrected that. I'm not crazy about, the constant indenting when there's no need to indent at the first paragraph. So that's one thing, and it's very minor. The block quotes are not properly formatted, but then again, I don't think we have any indication as to what style guide you used. So maybe that would be good information to include at some point. And maybe, because you have a list of works cited, I'm not sure, I suppose that's what we're supposed to do, works cited, but a reference list might help too. And I think that, whatever style guide you decide to use should be mentioned in some way. With regard to other formatting issues, epigraphs that begin any section or chapter should be formatted according to epigraph style. So you'll want to check that out. Now, you had at the very part of your presentation dealt with lectura profunda, and I have a question, and I'm going to put down my list so that I'm not just reading the list. But did it occur to you at any point to translate that as deep reading?
I did, but it's not. I personally thought it sounded a bit strange. And the term is not very much used as much as close reading is. So based on the occurrence of it and how relevant or how much it was used in books that refer to different types of reading, I've stayed with close reading.
Yeah, I understand. And I understand that actually there's even a judgment issue. There's a judgment issue involved with that. But we do have a contrast in the text that occurs quite a few times between superficial reading. The opposite of superficial is deep. I would say just consider, and do some more research on that, because you love research. But do some more research on that within this particular context. And maybe look at some of the authors, because I have found that, and I know that there's a discussion involving that, but also given the contrast between superficial, the opposite of superficial is not close. So think about it. The other thing too that has to do with part of your presentation and also the very beginning of your thesis is a misusage issue. And that's where conciencia is translated as conscience. It should be consciousness or awareness, but certainly not conscience, because has to do with ethics or obligations, but it's not the same. Okay, so you'll want to correct that throughout wherever it appears. Also, a more general comment that there were quite a few errors with prepositions. For example, in the page I saw a couple of times on the book, but it was mostly in and on issues. And I noted them wherever I ran across them. And I have to say, when we talk about digital sources, that becomes particularly problematic because, if you're looking at the New York Times, did you see something in the New York Times or on the New York Times website? It becomes actually even more complicated with digitization, which brings up another thing. There's an inconsistency between the use of digitization and digitalization. I would suggest using one, but not both. And there's of the other issues, and I'm going to go down this list pretty quickly, I think. Whenever you're quoting from a book or paraphrasing or discussing the content of a book, you should generally use the present tense, unless you have to absolutely emphasize that something occurred in the past. And so there's an inconsistency in that. So you'll want to, review that. I did mark it up on the text, in the text, excuse me. Okay, conjunctions also, I found that there were a lot of conjunctions that could have been there and would have made for more of a scholarly tone, but weren't there. I'll just give you a hypothetical, instead of referring to something specific, but this happens quite a lot in the text. He says he likes ice cream, as opposed to he says that he likes ice cream. There were so many that's that are missing that I found I found it a little bit too informal in nature, instead of a more formal register. So I made a note of that as well. Okay, let me go back to this. Another stylistic issue, according to most style guides, when you're referring to the chapters, for example, chapter 1, chapter 2, whatever, that should be capitalized or title case, not lowercase. I mean, if you're not giving a specific number, then you can leave it. You can say in the last chapter, fine, that's lowercase. But if a specific chapter, chapter 6, chapter 7, that should be uppercase. All right. Another point that I found is that I think the register was sometimes too low. Instead of saying states, you would say says. Instead of saying referring to, you would say going back to. And these are all make your translation seem a lot more informal. And I don't, and also less varied in terms of vocabulary. So I would really consider changing most of those. I don't think it's the worst thing, but I don't think it actually even matches sometimes the register of the author. All right, now, something I think is a little bit more important. There were quite a few instances of literal incorrect renderings. For example, the verb experimentar does not always mean experiment, it also means experience. And so you have actually the verb translated as experiment, what readers experiment. No, they're not experimenting anything, they're experiencing something. So that occurs quite a lot, not quite a lot, that occurs a couple of times, excuse me. A similar situation is with the verb elaborar, which is, and reelaborar, it's not elaborate. I would consider formulate and reformulate, but it's not elaborar. And so we have a few other situations, and also rescatar. We don't rescue an author. we can refer to an author, but we don't rescue. So that's rescatar, or rescue an idea. That doesn't work, and I made a note of that. The other thing too is I'm not fond of materializar, used sometimes very literally as materialized, because I start to see ghosts. I think that you could come up with something else, and I gave you some suggestions. Okay, now some of the things some of the language that is used not only derives from technical language, from current technical language, but also from theoretical language and even philosophical language specifically postmodern philosophical language. And so I don't know if you get the exact equivalent sometimes in English. And I'm glad that you found spatialization, but I think that spatialization is also a theoretical concept that does have to do with postmodern writing. So I'm glad that you got that, but we have to understand that a lot of the terms he took directly from English and maybe just, created calques. I think that was, in some cases, I think that really was true. So it's not so much of a, jump to go from what he's writing into English. The whole conundrum with soporte, I'm going to throw my 2 cents in. Support.
Support is used in the
and where I get support from, and I'm not going to say that it would work in every single case, because I know that he's using it in different, and I even think sometimes device could work, but depending on what he's talking about. But when he talks about papyrus, and he talks about cuneiform clay tablets, and then he talks, we're also talking about, and this is where it's interesting, you would never think, the term comes from art history and also from art as well. When you talk about, it's not a medium, it's actually the material, it's what the Real Academia gave you. But the term that's used in English is support for that. So we're talking about different supports. Artists will use different supports, for example, canvas, paper, and that word is used. So I think that you can use that word support in many instances. Just, if you don't believe me, you could look for it, and I think you'll find it. And I think
I found it used a lot in terms of art. So I did find it used in art, but not necessarily found in writing. In writing, they usually refer to paper as the material. And so that's why I stuck with material.
Yeah, but when you go from something like a clay tablet to an electronic device, I don't know if we can call a device a material. So the thing is that's why the word support actually works across that. Just think about it. But I was a little bit surprised that option didn't appear. Okay. Now, by the way, web appears many times as in the World Wide Web, but it's always lowercase, and I don't think that's really what it should be, not according to Merriam-Webster. I know these things are changing. Other usage issues, multiple and throughout. I would avoid, to the degree possible, using multiple, because actually it has a different definition. I would say that go look for what multiple means. I know that in Puerto Rico, in the Spanish-speaking media and the press, everything is multiple. It's the only word that exists to express plurality. It's the only word, the only one that's ever used. And I think it's infecting the English that is spoken here as well. But I know that that's occurring in the United States too. What's wrong with numerous or various, or those old-fashioned words? Because multiple has also a sense of being multifaceted, and I don't think that it not just a number of times. So be careful with your usage of that. Also, throughout should not be used when you don't mean in the totality, like from here, everywhere. Throughout means everywhere, 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 everywhere. So I don't think we want that totality. We can use words like during, like during the 1980s, not throughout the 1980s, unless it was something that was happening constantly. So that's another usage issue. Okay. Now, There were a couple, oh yes. You have one case where you use pertinent, the term pertinent, and then you give its opposite as being impertinent. Now, impertinent certainly is not the word that you're looking for, because impertinent means something like brazen. I mean, how impertinent of you. You know, it's not an opposite, so you're gonna have to find an opposite there. Now, there's another one too. I'm gonna have to go to the text because I don't even, know what he means here. So I'm gonna go to the text. Okay, and this is mentioned in the preface, but it comes up again later on, and it has to do with the soportes again, but it's la fabricación de soportes no evanescentes and manufacturing of non-evanescent materials. I have to find that exactly where that occurs. Okay. Yeah, I see where it is. Manufacturing. Okay. What does that mean?
So that sentence was actually very problematic because I did not understand what he meant by that. Based on the context and what he goes on to say later on, I found that he was referring to things that would be physical. So when he refers to like the Socrates idea of that words were evanescent, that they would disappear, but in a positive way. And then he refers to non-evanescent materials, referring to how writing is physical and it lasts forever. I stuck with non-evanescent because it was the most similar word to what he was using. But yes, that sentence was very confusing.
Okay, if you do a Google search in quotes for non-evanescent materials, you will not find anything. So that's usually an indication that maybe we should do something else. And also manufacturing, I'm not sure that that's even the right word to use either, maybe production, because we're not talking about necessarily manufacturing processes the way that we know of them today. But I would think about maybe production of more durable or everlasting, more durable supports or materials in that case, because non-evanescent, it seems like going such a far distance to, relay some concept. I think it's just confusing, I think, unnecessarily. Yeah. Okay, now there was one thing that I wanted to look at. Oh, by the way, yeah, I'm sorry. I won't continue too much longer here. But I want to go to that for her part. Okay. I think that I would rework that particular sentence, and it was something that came up in your presentation. For her part, Woolf updates Socrates' claims and argues that if information without direction could create a false sense of knowledge and therefore restrict the most crucial, slow, and difficult thought process that lead to real knowledge. Oh, I see. Yeah, I would say whether, and argues whether, maybe, but first of all, that expression for her part, which is extremely popular in Spanish, por su parte, I think is unnecessary. And I would try to avoid that construction. And I'm not sure whether slow thought process for lento. I don't know, it just doesn't work for me, the idea of a slow thought process, maybe deliberate. I'm trying to think of what would be better there, but I don't think that slow thinking would necessarily impress anyone as being a good thing. Do you understand?
He does talk about how reading in print kind of slows you down in a way, but not in like a negative way. He talks about how you have to be more cautious of what the print text says, and then eliminate your surroundings. And in that sense, so that sort of describes why I chose slow.
Okay, yeah.
Profound or thorough, o algo así.
What?
Profound or thorough. Because I think that's the sense.
Thorough sounds good.
Thorough, deliberate,
Deliberate.
focused even. You know, but slow doesn't. You understand that it could have a really negative.
It could have a negative implication. Yeah.
Okay, and then the last thing that I have to say is something that I really couldn't understand. So let's go there. And this is at the top of page 16 in the translation. All right. While the latter invites the reader to forget, it's at the bottom of page 15, continuing onto the top of page 16. While the latter invites the reader to forget about the environment and the time elapsed, given the greater level of commitment and concentration required, the screen invites to keep reading conditions explicit due to it. I don't understand that.
Is this page 16 of the preface or the translation?
No, the translation. This is the actual translation.
It's on page 15. On the last second.
Yeah,
last paragraph.
it says 15 at the bottom. Yeah. It's page 46 technically of the entire thing, but it's on page 15, beginning there at the very, very bottom. While the latter invites the reader to forget about the environment and the time elapsed, given the greater level of commitment and concentration, I might put after a lapse, put a comma there for a breath of air. The screen invites who? Invites us, invites the reader to keep reading. And then suddenly, what is this conditions explicit due to? I don't understand that.
The reading conditions there refers to the purpose, and so the purpose of reading.
Invites to keep reading conditions. Oh, I see what. Invites to keep reading conditions explicit. I think there must be another way of reformulating that, because
yeah, probably the reading purpose.
Okay, and maybe another comma after nature, and then change that to which enables the possibility of multitasking. Invites I would actually get rid of invites.
Okay.
The screen maintains explicit reading conditions due to its nature as a metamedium.
Which enables?
It maintains explicit reading conditions or specific reading conditions. See, the thing is, I'm glad that I couldn't understand this at all when I first read it. Maintains explicit reading conditions due to its nature as a metamedium. you can leave it as its metamedium nature, comma, which enables the possibility of multitasking. Okay, then now it makes sense, but you'll understand why I was confused.
Yeah.
Can I have a question there? Can which and that be interchanged? Those, do they mean the same?
After a comma, you should not use that ever, almost. Which should be used after a comma. And the reason I'm putting in the comma is because if you don't have those commas there, it becomes really difficult to understand that sentence.
La pantalla invita a mantener explícita la condición de la persona que habilita. Es que, what is enabling the possibility of multitasking?
The conditions in which digital reading occurs. So it's the metamedium aspect.
Es la pantalla, it's the screen. La pantalla invita a mantener las condiciones que habilita. If you take out all of the other parts of that sentence,
yeah,
it's the screen. It's not the reading conditions. That's why I asked.
Yeah, I know, but the thing is that it's I think it's unambiguous enough because enables is a singular verb form, so it wouldn't be going with conditions.
Okay.
It's just that the commas really help to make, unless you're going to use a dash. I mean, you could while the latter invites the reader to forget about the environment and then time elapsed, then you could have an M dash, given the greater level of commitment and concentration required, M dash. The screen maintains explicit reading conditions due to its metamedium nature, which enables, okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's okay, that's fine. Mm-hmm. Now I understand.
Yeah.
But, all right, I think that's really all that I wanted to say. Unless something else comes up.
Well, I want to start by congratulating you because this is first of all, not only because of the work you did, but congratulate you and thank you for choosing this text. It's so interesting, and I have a lot of questions that you will find when you get questions that I ask myself or things that makes you think about the work of the translator as a producer of multi-medium text, and I think it also impacts the way we do research. So it's I really would love to read the whole book. So thank you for that. I have only one question, and this has to do a little bit with your presentation. What is a translation problem?
What is a translation problem? Something that usually it goes beyond the usual translation problems. So something that was particularly hard from that text. Yeah.
So all of your discussion that you had on the writer style and the part that you explain about the style in your preface about his style. And this is something I'm not blaming you on this. I think I blame us as professors because we sometimes don't help you really. You just explained it perfectly, but we don't practice this exercise of doing a commented translation. It's many times, and it helps. I think that's in what you discussed there. It's plain translation.
Translation.
It's translation. Spanish allows you to make those very, very, very long sentences, especially in this type of text, which is directed towards scholarly. I mean, somebody that doesn't have a good skills in reading will have difficulty probably reading it in Spanish, but a normal scholar like low scholarly level readers should be able to understand. So I mean, you can just leave it there, but I just wanted to make that point, not for you, probably for people, for other students that are looking at this. Please don't tell me that that part of the writing style of the author. I mean, if you have a writing style that the author starts inventing words and things like that, well, that's a translation problem.
I'm sorry, did you use the word problem in your thesis?
No, I said challenges.
Okay, Luis, do you have any problems with the word challenges?
No, yes, I do have, because it's a challenge.
But can we use that word?
Yeah, but okay. I don't think that is a translation challenge or problem. That is part of translating. That's absolutely part of translation. Deciphering and it's something that happens to me a lot. I mean, I have to, sometimes I just have to cross things out, and because sentences are very, very long, and you suddenly lose track of where the idea is going. So I actually take a sentence and I just start recomposing it in Spanish so I can get the main ideas together. And that's sometimes how I have to decipher a sentence in Spanish, because it's so complicated to understand. And that's Spanish.
Yeah, I agree, but I still think that, in this particular case, the verbiage did provide for beyond normal circumstance, and I think that verbiage also extended into neologisms, the creation of new words based on English counterparts, calques, that kind of thing. So I think that there was a little bit unusual. There were certain unusual circumstances here.
It's Argentine, the writer.
Sorry for Argentina. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
By the way,
anyway,
I'm very glad that you did not use the descriptor Argentinian. Thank you.
No. I remember that from your class.
I was your student. I learned that.
I remember that from your class.
Yes.
I think everyone will never forget that.
We all know, and it's Argentine.
Okay.
Everybody and if somebody that takes a class with you doesn't know that, he shouldn't get a pass in anything. No. Anyway, so apart from that, talking about the formatting, well, you have the problem with the indenting. I don't. I do suggest, the
epigraph.
Yeah, the epigraphs to mimic the original text. And I would also have, like, every section, I mark them all, every section have them bold or a larger font, a little higher separation from the previous one, because sometimes it's like I get startled. I think it's easier to read. And if you are using styles.
Yes, but I changed them all so that they would all be the same font. So you can't see it. They're there just for la tabla de contenido.
Mapita. Yeah. So but go ahead and change them a bit so that you can, I mean, maybe make them bold or something, so that every section shows up. Also, when you generate your file, when you save it as a PDF, there's an option somewhere where you convert your styles into bookmarks.
Okay.
And that will create a map, a table of contents in the bookmarks part of your PDF, and it will make it accessible.
Okay.
So that when you have somebody that has to use a screen reader, they can get the whole skeleton, and it's really easy to navigate if you do that. Yeah, also formatting. Use, I don't know why Word does not by default use non-breaking hyphens. I just don't understand that. You know what non-breaking hyphens are?
At the end of the line?
Yeah,
they don't...
use the hyphens, instead of using normal hyphens, use non-breaking hyphens, because a lot of them fall on the last part of the sentence and the word gets cut up. If you use the non-breaking, the word will go.
Okay, yeah, I did notice that, but I didn't realize that I could change it.
Yeah, just don't use the
Regular hyphens.
The normal hyphen. Use the and you can do a find and replace. The other thing, I mean, I don't have much more to say. Your discussion on your presentation on your thesis on terms, on your research on terms, that is a translation problem, and it's beautifully explained. It's very thorough, it's very clear, and I commend you on that. There are some entries on your references, like Hales, pardon. I think you have 2 entries in your bibliography for Hayes, so you need to distinguish between which one is which. Also, if you're stating the name of the author 1 or 2 times, you repeat that the last name in the reference, in the inline quotation. So just take a look at that. Real Academia Española de la Lengua doesn't accept words anymore. They actually are trying, probably unsuccessfully, for people to understand that they just
recognize,
gather the usage of words.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's because before on previous centuries, maybe it was prescriptive, but you don't necessarily have. I don't think it's accepting or not accepting, and not finding a word in the Real Academia Española de la Lengua doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. Yeah.
No,
not anymore, at least.
It is just not it's just not recorded, and they're slower than the probably any, like Merriam-Webster's. They actually update their dictionaries all the time, but they're trying to do that, and they're trying to really keep up with changes in the usage of our language.
Later found out that their Twitter is a lot more active than their
Instagram. And it's very good, and there's a lot of very interesting questions.
Mm-hmm.
When you discuss specialization, you end that paragraph, that discussion with, I concluded that specialization was the correct translation. Is there a correct translation?
The best translation for this context.
Okay. Déjame ver qué más. Your last paragraph of your preface, your reflection on how much work, how you realize how much work has to go into this any type of translation. It's very it reflects how much you've learned. So I congratulate you on that. I would I know you cut out a piece of text because it made your translation. It wasn't only 1,300 words. You shouldn't have cut that out.
It ended up being still too long.
From what you say, it was about 1,300 words. I don't know. It
was about 13,200 something.
1,500 más. ¿Qué más da? I suggest that you add it, that part, or if you don't want to add it, just say it, like put some kind of marking so that the reader knows that there was something.
Translated it so I could easily add it.
Yeah, well, if you have it translated, then you can easily add it too. There's also some instances where you have your em dash with a space before. Sometimes I've checked on that. Because in English, you don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
¿Y qué más?
also the quotation marks sometimes don't go exactly where they should. After commas, I found a couple of cases of those.
Okay.
And by the way, in your bibliography, I think you have to review that. Luis also mentioned something, but you use Spanish quotation marks for one of the texts that's cited there. That should be fixed.
I did not notice it. I'll go.
Yeah, and for David's suggestion on whatever style guide you're going to use, I mean, you can just add it to your bibliography, and that's it.
Okay. So not to the preface, not explaining on the preface. Just...
No, you don't have to.
You don't have to.
Okay. Mention somewhere.
If you put it in the bibliography, it's enough. Because
Okay.
we can look, oh, here, that's the style guide she's using.
We need to know, because we need to know whether you're doing things right.
Okay.
Exactly. And what else? I have made some corrections or suggestions of English. You have to take that with unas pincitas. But for example, I think this one is correct. Like face-to-face communication, that is hyphenated, no? So yeah, some of
yes, for the adjectives.
Yeah, face-to-face communication.
That.
Yeah, but I marked it. It's marked.
Okay.
In page 8 of your translation, page 38 of the PDF. ¿Dónde es que está eso? For her part, Wolf updates Socrates' claims and argues if information without duration. The original text says plantearse. I would suggest questions herself or something like that, because it's plantearse y argumentar. It's not the same thing in Spanish.
Okay.
I think. I mean, those are suggestions. That's not.
Okay.
Yes. Something else. You should signal in everything because all of the research you've done doesn't show regarding the quotations, doesn't show up in the translated text. You should whenever you translated the text, you should put our translation or my translation, or I don't know how you say it in English, but you should acknowledge that you did your translation.
Okay. Should that be included as endnotes too?
I was going to tell you that you should just eliminate those endnotes and just make a bibliografía at the end of the text, because you did a nice research. Just add the bibliography of whatever you did, and just forget about these endnotes.
Okay.
I'm gonna step away for a second, okay?
Yeah, go ahead. A ver, the non-breaking hyphen. Sometimes, yeah. When you quote the name of the book in Spanish, for the most part, you're using the Spanish casing of the words. Make sure you always use the Spanish one. Always use lowercase, sobre todo after the column, because I thought you were using the English casing, which I don't like. But if you decide doing that, that's fine. But then most of them are in Spanish, real Spanish casing. ¿Qué se dice?
I thought I had the Spanish casing, but
yeah, sometimes you don't.
Okay, I'll
for the most
make sure
part
that's
you do.
uniform.
There's an instance where you have the 21st century with Roman numerals. I don't think that's the standard in English. Internet, la imprenta del siglo XXI, you translated the printing press of the...
Oh yeah, that's true. One. It should have been 21.
21st, yeah. I think it should be the
I think, yeah.
some other commas. I don't have anything else to say. I have all of you have. I made all my comments in your PDF. It's only 78 comments. Most of the time, I have over 300 comments. Yeah. Wow. So yeah, really, I really enjoyed reading this. It was very, very easy to read for me because I'm not an English native speaker. But I thought you did an excellent job, so I really congratulate you. And I know David is taking a break, but we can take our break now if Laura.
Okay, so we're going to pause for a few minutes and we're going to have a conversation. To our viewers, please don't leave. Hang on tight, we'll be back. Thank you. We would like to congratulate you. We have decided that you have won a sobresaliente for your thesis. So congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank
Very
you.
good.
Thank you so much to Laura for being just the most amazing mentor I could have asked for, and to David and Luis for taking the time to read my thesis, and all of your comments. They're greatly appreciated.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, it was really a pleasure. Although I got a little bit angry at this guy a couple of times.
Don't worry.
Really? Are you sure?
Yes. I agreed with him for the most part, but yeah, it was a love-hate relationship.
Yeah. For some of us dinosaurs, maybe we prefer to be a little bit more judgmental. I don't know.
Yeah. No, but that it's something to keep in mind because it's changing and it's different.
It is, but yeah.
There's nothing that we can do about it. It's different.
Yeah, no, of course, absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe in the future, reading will just be an injection.
Maybe, we never know. So Laura, say goodbye.
Okay then, thank you again. Thank you to our viewers, thank you to our readers, and thank you, Michelle, for a wonderful, wonderful job. So thank you everyone. Bye-bye.
Yeah, and before we leave, remember we have Ana Marie Rosa Nazario's defense at 2 p.m. And then on the 18th, we have Ana Inés Corbett. And on the 21st, we have Astrid Teclet. So we have quite a few defensas on schedule. So we hope you can join us. All right. Goodbye and thanks.